Hey everyone. So every time I get onto this podcast, it's like it's a dream come true for me every time. I promise my audience that I'm going to come back and I'm going to bring to you unique people, unique definitions, unique things to discuss and talk about. I am very excited. There's a couple of reasons for that. And I'm going to wind up Amanda Rothbard, who's going to join us a bit here because it's going to make her blush a bit. Amanda is actually the community manager with Gamma. Now, Gamma is in the news for all the right reasons, right? Fantastic product. They've taken designing, they've taken, I would say, the perfect Microsoft Slayer, right, Amanda? That's what I call, right?
Mm.
And I've been involved for more than a year. In that 1 year, I've been exposed to Amanda and the way that she thinks about community at Gamma. I really wanted to bring Amanda on board to have a conversation with B2B sellers who are my primary, ideal customers that are listening to this podcast to see and try to connect some dots for them. We typically talk about technique, we talk about mindset in sales, but there's also another reality. No man is an island, nor is sales. We work in a community, we work in a team. And I really wanted to give Amanda an opportunity to kind of connect the dots for us as to how the work that she does as the community manager at Gamma and her background in community and CX customer service and support, how she brings the unique flavor and how we can connect this back to sales. Amanda, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And I will say this is my first podcast ever. So I'm very excited to be doing this with you.
Yes, and I love guinea pigs. They're so cute, right? No problem at all, Amanda. Amanda, I'm a relaxed kind of guy, right? What I wanted to start off with was that Amanda, every person has its their own unique journey, right? You have taken a pathway which is very different from a lot of other people, right? And I don't like to get into conversation around academics, right? What made you choose your majors and stuff. But I really do want to ask you something. When I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, you have been active for the last decade in roles which have been very close to customers, right? Community, customer support, customer experience. And I come from a sales background, right? And when you're in sales operations, you typically look at how salespeople manage their own ecosystem, but also look at other variables that matter in the system. How does the process touch upon a customer's life? It's not just about the proposal only. I wanted to get an understanding from you. If you could take the next minute or two, give me a biographical sketch of the type of work, your journey, and what exactly drew you into community CX or this type of work?
Yeah, I mean, I also feel like I've had a somewhat interesting career trajectory because a lot of my experience is specifically within customer support and customer experience. I think what drew me to community in my career is that it was already such a big part of my personal life. And I am someone that, I used to live in a somewhat rural part of California, and I think what really helped me feel more comfortable in the town that I was living in was getting more involved in the community. So it's always been a big part of my life. And then, the transition into community specifically, it wasn't like a conscious decision that I made. It was
Yeah.
something that I kind of ended up falling into. It was actually during my time at Intercom that I had an opportunity to work on a project. I was working on their customer support team, and they said, "Hey, we're going to be working on starting up the community again." And I kind of got looped into that. And then that's what ended up, sort of kicking me off on this trajectory into community specifically. So from there, I went on to manage a community at Meta, and then ended up falling into, this role at Gamma managing the community. So yeah, it wasn't like a conscious decision, but I'm so glad that I did because one of the things I think I love about managing a community and being in community is getting to build relationships with people and get to know them outside of just I mean understanding what motivates them about Gamma, for example,
Yeah.
but also
Yeah.
understanding them and building relationships on a more
So I'm going
personal
to
level.
drill in a bit there because what I really wanted to do is that there are many people on this call who may not know what community means, right? There's a certain connotation in the way you're using it. Would you take a minute to just kind of define how you look at community and how organizations like Gamma, Loom, and others use community to create momentum? Just a perspective that'll help ground people on this call.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people don't know what community means. And when I say I'm a community manager, the question I always get is, "Oh, so you run social media?" And that's not at all what I do. I mean, in the context of, Gamma and communities I've led in the past, it generally involves a some sort of community forum, right? So the Gamma community is hosted on Slack, but there's a community forum where people sort of gather, and there's different avenues where you can sign up for events, you can ask questions, you can have
Yeah.
discussions. Something I particularly like about using Slack as a community tool is that it really emphasizes discussion. and it's a little bit easier to use, I think, in that you can connect with people more easily as opposed to like a more formal forum. The Gamma community actually predates my time at Gamma. It was initially founded by Grant, our CEO, and the other co-founders, John and James. And I believe initially it was started to specifically get the power users of Gamma and get them onto different betas that we were testing and get their feedback on the product,
Yeah.
which that's still the core of the Gamma community today. But I think community in general, it can mean, it's essentially, I don't know, I think about it as a place where people can meet that are motivated or interested in a common goal, whether that's a product or, maybe an industry that they're in. And it's an opportunity for networking, for if it's specific to a product, understanding best practices, giving your feedback
Giving you
to
feedback. Yep.
people. Yeah.
So,
Um,
Amanda, I just want to make sure that the audience kind of understands. I've been associated with Gamma for about a year and a half, maybe two. When I first touched upon the product, I was pleasantly surprised because I'm always meddling, dabbling with tons of products and stuff. But with Gamma, I just felt something different. It felt lightweight. It has a lot of features that were kind of missing, but then the comparison was with Microsoft PowerPoint, which has been a stalwart for decades, right? So now when you bring something overnight out, everyone wants everything on the other side, but they don't want the other side, which is always fun, right? So it's one of those balancing acts. In my interaction with you, some of the attributes that I saw that you brought, which I thought was pretty cool, was that one, you are there, but you're not, how do you say this, obtrusive in any way. You're not aggressive in your style of functioning. And I think this is something very interesting for me to understand, because when I look at community, right, I used to think that you have someone that's going to keep flogging the whip to keep this audience in check and so on. But I think that you have built certain rules of engagement, a structure, a methodology, and I know this sounds really funny that the host is waxing on this, but I have to, because I'm not a normal host. I'm also a huge, as you call it, power user of the product. I actually enjoy the product a lot. I've integrated it into my workflow quite substantially. And I would argue that 80% of our revenue is touched along the way by Gamma in some context, right? So, Amanda, knowing you and knowing the fact that you grew up in rural California, as you put it, right? And you spoke about, falling into, I just got the feeling that that's one of the realities of community. Community is actually a bunch of people. For me, community at Gamma resonates in a very unique way. It's about, I actually feel safe enough to state my mind, state a demand, and know that the Gamma community is not going to make fun of it or ridicule it. Everything is going to be heard out. And I think that's power. That's tremendous power. And I'm going to dig into that a bit more with you to understand what principles do you guys apply. I mean, your rules of engagement were pretty interesting. Maybe you could wax on them a bit and tell me what was going on in your mind when you were putting those rules together, right? Now, I'm going to pivot here. So you start your career off, you work with Intercom, Loom, Meta, Customer, Gamma now, and clearly you're a community person. And I get it that you have a personality drive that allows you to do this job in a certain way. But if I were to ask you, when it comes to understanding the user community, what has stayed consistent? What have you applied from a frame of reference, right? To look at this situation and make sense of it.
yeah, I would say that what stays the same across any community that you're managing is that the members in your community feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
If someone is using the community, I mean, a lot of people just use even the Gamma community to ask a question, submit some feedback, but they're not necessarily engaging on a daily or weekly basis. But I think one of the things I really focus on as a community manager is to make sure that people feel like they can personally reach out to myself or people on the Gamma team or other people in the Gamma community and feel like they can actually have a real conversation and connection with them, whether it's something about like a product, product feedback, or even something that a bug that they've encountered. So the way that I focus on belonging is I focus a lot on the onboarding experience in the community. I think you joined the community before I had an opportunity to actually build out the
You're right.
onboarding
I
experience.
absolutely. I've actually seen it to go from. I don't want to call it ugly duckling into a beautiful swan, right? Let's not do that because that would disappoint the gang before. But I think it got structure, it got momentum, and I also think that you laid out some ground rules which made it very, very interesting. Because and this is, I want to be very cautious because this podcast is about you and not about me and my experience with Gamma. But one thing that I really enjoyed was actually seeing strategy being executed in real time. the amount of course corrections, the amount of expansion, the ideas, right? Coming up with an idea. Then when you get an idea that works, double down on it. If
Mhm.
some style was working, let's do it. Uh, to be honest with you, I think you guys also extended the way that you handle the Slack features as well to your advantage. You have created so much integration, and in fact,
Mhm.
it's become easier to actually now take the conversation to the next level, which also reflects Gamma's own journey and learning from that. So that by itself is a segment talking about how a CX manager also grows with the opportunity and then keeps pivoting and pivoting and pivoting to keep delivering enhanced value back to the Gamma community, both outside but also to the guys inside who are building a product out, right? You're an amazing bridge between the two. So I'm going to pivot now. And this is where I really want to talk about. You are now in a very unique position. You are now dealing with these power users. You're also, and I think you just alluded to it, right? Recording bugs. People come to you with feature requests. Tell me a bit more about this feedback loop. And if this feedback loop is so important, then what do you do to make sure that doesn't break in a fast growing company like Gamma?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel very fortunate to be managing a community at a company like Gamma because I think one of the things that I can't take credit for is that the entire team at Gamma genuinely cares about the feedback that we're getting from our power users in the community. And that's something that I can try to have an impact on that as a community
Yeah.
manager,
Yes.
but I actually I think it comes from the culture that Gamma has as a company. And really, one of the mottos at Gamma is give the people what they want. And so when, you as as a community member have feedback for us, it's something that we're actually going to take and really try to understand, or, we'll say, oh, that's actually something we're already thinking about building. But the way that I have focused on the feedback loop within the Gamma community specifically is I have focused on some automation. So, you have met and very well Nick Payne, one of our product designers on the team.
Yes. Yes.
And one of the things that I ended up doing in the community is that we have a place where people can leave product feedback. And so, but then it wasn't going anywhere. So really, unless you were searching the community for it, you weren't actually going to be seeing that
Yeah.
product feedback.
Yeah.
So one of the feedback loops that I created was I just created an integration with the API using Zapier, and now anything that goes into that is in Slack and the ideas and request channel also goes into our product feedback board. And then that gets seen by Nick and the other product designers and the product managers. So that's something that was really important to me. And then the other thing is we also internally have a place where we can advocate for product feedback. And that's another thing that I really like to focus on as the community manager, because a lot of the times there are trends that we're hearing from people in the product or things that they want to be seeing. And a lot of the times it's stuff that, is already on our radar, but there are some things where, we have a trend that's so powerful and we're hearing from so many different people about that they need it,
Yes.
that it actually becomes something where I'm the one that's advocating for them and making sure that the rest of the company sees and understands why this is such an important feature for them within Gamma, essentially.
You know what? There's so much in what you just said. There's so much. And I really want to just pivot and just kind of intercept this right now. When we talk about community, right? I know you said our community is enabled on Slack, but I want the listeners to understand one truth here. It could be enabled on a piece of paper. It could actually be little tin cans with string through it. But community is something very different, right? I'd call community as a trust engine. When you were designing the community thought process, right? I'm sure it's not that Slack led the design. You have done automation with Slack. I get that. But real community is about, how do you create this confidence for people to then adopt what you're trying to do with them, right? What do you do, Amanda, that you would argue is slightly different from what others do to make this community meaningful rather than just decorative, as I would call it? And you know what I mean by decorative, right? You can do all the slacks and you can do slacks and you can do all the automation. But if you mentioned Nick Payne as an example, right? But if Nick's not attentive, Nick's not listening, what's going to happen? Now, you already alluded to the fact that Gamma's culture, the way you guys hire most likely has created this beautiful, I would say, tension, and it's not a
Mhm.
friction or a drag. I actually think it's think of it as a slick oil that actually keeps the puck moving from one area to the other, and I found that to be really 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 very powerful. And if I could actually get into that to discuss, that would be really powerful. But what makes a community meaningful rather than decorative? How would you answer that from the work you're doing at Gamma right now?
Yeah. What makes a community meaningful rather than decorative? I would say, just like any other industry, like if you're in sales or you're in customer experience or marketing, there is like a playbook for managing a successful community. And there are areas where a lot of what I'm doing is the same. I think what probably makes my approach more unique is that I really try to tailor what we're doing in the community to Gamma's values as a company. And one of Gamma's values is to don't be boring. And so a lot of the times when I'm thinking about programs to build in the community or contests or, you know, any sort of content that I'm putting in the community, I always try to take that extra step of saying, is this something that people are going to want to engage with?
Want
Is this something that they're going to feel inspired by? And I think I'm still figuring that out, because I'm not so used to taking these really big swings when it comes to, building community, because there is like a playbook that you can follow. At the same time, I think I'm being pushed more and more out of the sort of tiny experiments and thinking more about the bigger swings. And I feel also, you had mentioned something about how the community, what did you say? You feel like you can show up and be yourself in the community. And I feel the same way. I feel like with everyone that we have in the community, our members, I feel like I can show up and be myself and also just try new things and experiment with new things. And, if it doesn't work, that's fine. And I can, pivot. But I think it kind of goes both ways. I don't know. It's really not just, I think of my role as what I'm trying to say is I feel really fortunate to be
I'm
managing a
with you.
community
I
at
I I
Gamma.
I think I get the gist. And I've also realized that you are one of those individuals that's not going to punt themselves or brag about their own selves, right? So I'm going to do that a little bit at this point, right? When I look at the Gamma community, right, Amanda, and I'm going to give my perspective on it, is that I've noticed one thing. You guys have actually improved the confidence of the team giving feedback to you. And I know it sounds really odd. But what that means is that I give feedback to a lot of things. A lot of things. I mean, we talk about politics, we talk about the food we had with someone, right? You can see a genuine conversation when actually someone follows up, when someone actually pulls in other people into that conversation. And to me, that's when your community comes alive rather than just being active, right? And there's
Mhm.
another trick I can tell people that I really dig about the Gamma setup and the work that you do, Amanda, is that the fact that if you look at the depth of a tree on a conversation, right, you will always get some complex engagement going on with back and forth between two or three very vocal, even to the point where someone says, well, Deepak, what you're doing is very unique, but that's not how I operate. This is how I operate. Now, you could think of that as territorial, but I think that that's a massive benefit to Gamma, who's now sitting there trying to understand, I am going to use this. And Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have on Slack, what, nearly 1,000 people now, or maybe more in your
Yeah,
program, in the community?
about 1,200 people.
1,200 people. Now, can you imagine 1,200 people fighting and arguing with each other? But that's not what I'm trying to imply here. What I'm trying to imply is that Gamma's ability to actually get the people to contradict themselves or to enhance upon someone's idea is what makes you so unique, because you've encouraged that quite aggressively. You are actively you don't, I don't know how to put it, Amanda, but sometimes I get the feeling that you have adopted a low key approach and kept it low key because the momentum that you've created with the guys standing up and coming forward. So as an example, if Gamma says we are releasing a new feature, would someone test it? I will take a bet right there and then that within 10 minutes you're going to have at least 5 people telling you, yeah, done it, sucks, yeah, done it, but you got some
Yeah.
feedback, and I think that's the goal and objective, right? Now, there's a lot we can discuss about activity, versus real energy. I mean, there's a lot of people that click 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 click, and you have 1,200 people, and yes, I must be honest, at the same time, of those 1,200 people, I would say that you have a group of 100 or 200 that are just crazy gamillions, for lack of a better word, right? Gambassadors, as you call it proudly. And these people always pop up, and I think that's really incredible, being able to have a group of people that will be there through thick and thin for crude. And I think that's when the community shines, right? Now, let's just go back a bit and let's get out of Gamma for a second here and just go back to your experience in customer service and support as well as community. You've gone through some what I call high velocity tech companies, right? And to be honest with you, I'm a coach and I always tell people a certain amount of stress is good for the system. but a consistently high level of stress is never good for a system. And here you are, Amanda Rothbard, laid back California rural native, who's telling me that you've gone through some really aggressive, assertive organizations in terms of growth, right? Now, one thing is sure, users in these organizations behave very differently, but you have had a front row seat to this. Amanda, what patterns do you see across these companies that actually tell you that they are actually understanding what's going on with the product in the market? And what were those redeeming principles that they put in place? So if, let's say, let's assume for 1 second that there's in a Gamma 2 in the makes and someone's listening to this podcast, what would you tell them you've observed in terms of best community practice or customer practice? And how do you make that come alive as you deal in setting up a community? What would those practices or principles look like? Values, as you called it, right? Now, I don't want you to regurgitate Gamma's values, but give me your values, that if you're doing this, you need to at least have A, B, C, D. And what are those A, B, C, Ds? Those nuggets would be awesome.
Yeah, my values. I mean, coming from a customer experience background, I think you really have to be willing to advocate for your users. And I think, at any sort of, like you said, high velocity company, everyone is constantly focusing on the work that they need to be doing. And, I have been at places where, it wasn't as easy to connect with the product team directly. So you have to get
Uh-huh.
creative and make sure that you can actually get the attention of the people who are building the product, right? I'm in community and customer experience. I don't build the product, I don't fix the bugs. So I would say genuinely advocating for your users and wanting to, I mean, I think just caring about that and trying to understand what is it about their workflow or how they're using the product that where they
Yeah.
need an additional feature or they need this bug to be fixed. The other thing that has been important for me, and this is again just like my own values, is being someone that I just use the term proactive. So one of the ways that I think about that is, if you're noticing a problem or you just see something that doesn't work as well as it could be, whether it's like something internally or it's something externally with the community members, I'm always trying to identify that and solve it
Yeah.
before it gets to be a real problem. And it's not to say that I can't do that I do that every time, but it's something that, I think as you are at as I've been at these growing tech companies, there's always sort of these like common issues that they experience, which is that, we need to scale, the team is siloed. And I'm not saying that's like specific to any particular company I've been at, but those are just the sort of things that tend to come up.
That you tend to
And
come up.
so
Yeah. Makes sense.
yeah, and so I
Makes sense.
think that being more proactive in your approach to, again, like if it's something that's not working for your community members or your customers, or if it's something that, internally that just isn't working as well as it could be, I like to take the approach of, I mean, just focusing on fixing it before it actually becomes a bigger problem.
So let's talk about these problems, because problems can come to you from your customers, from the way that your group is interacting with each other, right? Now, when I look at AI and when I look at the way that we do async work or whatever, right? I mean, to be honest with you, I'll give you an example. About 2 years ago, I got introduced to Videoed as a product, right? And I was like surprised. Why are salespeople recording mini videos and sending it to the customers, right? What does that even serve? And I was surprised to suddenly realize that I was falling asleep at the steering wheel. That's just how the market shifted. There was a new way to communicate. And I was like surprised. Then I saw the next surprise. Just suddenly comes Loom. Loom says, hey, by the way, here's a quick and dirty way to show you what I'm saying or talking about and walk you through it. And you get onboarded, you understand and I again was surprised. That's why didn't I think of that? That's such a cool idea. Now you've been involved with that type of stuff, right? Now, what surprises you with the way that AI has come along the way and the way that people are now searching, learning, and asking for help since you've been in customer support background? Where do you see things changing and how? And I want to be very careful because I don't want to get any information on Gamma from you, right? But what are the things that you're thinking about at Gamma itself to ensure that you keep intercepting and making sure that this technology is there? You did allude to it earlier when you spoke about all the automation you've done, right? You threw out the Zapier connectivity with Slack and your, what do you call it, your support tool that logs all the users stories and stuff like that, right? Something like that.
Mhm.
Tell me a bit more about the AI angle and where do you see that impact happening in the way that your customers or people search, learn, and ask for help today?
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to make sure I'm understanding your question, which is that It sounds like what you're asking is, how does AI impact how our customers approach us and ask questions? Is that
And how you respond to them, and how in AI in general is going to change the landscape for customer experience, customer support, and creating communities? Because I can already feel the impact, right? But I'm just
Mhm.
curious as to how are you, at the end of the day, you are, I would say, one of the few organizations out there, Gamma that is, which has AI at the core. Rightly, wrongly, sometimes you're at the right place at the right time. But as AI took off, Gamma was at, I would say, at such a beautiful point that someone said, wait a minute, I'm not missing this opportunity, and integrated it from day one itself. So now what you have is that you have AI native to the core. And all I'm saying is that as AI develops, there are a lot of people that get pretty excited about AI, but what AI can do for you that are very low level stuff, right? That's in my control. But how are you guys seeing AI as a way to see and help your community and your customers search, learn, and ask for help today? How would that change for you?
our customer support experience is also AI first. So, if you're going to be reaching out to Gamma support team, you're initially going to be talking to our AI agent. And then from there, there's sort of, the experience of humans in the loop.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is exactly answering your question, but I think something that's interesting with AI and how quickly it's shifted the landscape and how it continues to change so rapidly. Something I find as a community manager is
Mhm.
the desire and the need to connect with people, humans in real life, or just
Mhm.
actually connect with one another.
Yeah.
I think that, I don't know, I have my own thoughts on where customer support and customer experience is going with the introduction of AI. But I think actually what's been interesting is to see how the rise of community, and I don't necessarily think that the rise of a community within AI companies, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that,
Yeah.
if you're using AI, I use AI, I mean, I use AI all the time, and I do use it in the community. But really the point of the community and the emphasis on it is that you're actually talking to our CEO or our product designer or our product manager or myself. You're actually talking to people who, they're not an AI agent. They're actually someone who's going to take the time to have a conversation with you and understand what it is that you're looking for, or whatever it is that you're really asking in the community. I think that AI
Amanda,
has.
I have to stop you for a second there, because you just latched onto something that I think is very dear to a lot of people on the call. Everyone hears of AI and they talk about doom and gloom, job loss, and all that, right? What is really fascinating in your response, and I think your hesitation, is that I want to give credit to AI, but the reality is that as you use AI, the value of community actually grows exponentially. Because as you AI everything to death, people are going to miss or cherish the reality that ultimately you want to work with people, right? Now, unfortunately, people talk about human in the loop. And when I hear you hesitate, I actually find myself listening to kindred spirit. I love AI. I understand AI, but as a community manager, I think that this is, and you call it the rise of community, right? And what an amazing Star Wars sequel that would be, the rise of community. Dun, 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 dun. We can do that. Yes, absolutely. As you said, rise of community, actually realize the more AI we infuse, the more there's actually a need for that community spirit to be brought into the mix, because you cannot go and dumbify the entire universe down to that. You need to ultimately, and for salespeople listening in, one of the realities, and I say this to people, is that AI is supposed to be a force multiplier. At the end of the day, in the sales function, B2B, which simply means belly to belly, that's how my grandfather used to explain it to me, Amanda, right? If you talk to a customer and you're always dealing belly to belly, you can have all the tools and the gizmos and the phones on your ear, but ultimately it's the relationship that matters. For me, that moment of judgment is something that AI is actually going to sharpen you on. You now have, I would say, giving away the low hanging fruit and the low level automation, the low level thinking that you are doing. Get more structured and actually take your conversation to the next level using AI. And to do that, community is so powerful, because that conversation that you want to have is still with humans. And that
Yeah.
conversation. So when you were talking, I actually sensed that hesitation. You want to give due credit to AI, but there was also the community manager in you kind of feeling that, you know what, that the rise of community is actually going to be even more aggressive thanks to AI, because now community interaction can actually be spiced up by AI. And I'm really looking forward to that. And you've already proven it, right? Because in the terms of how you've made it easier for people to give their ideas and how easily it is recorded, what that simply means to me, at least, is that, Amanda, you getting faster time to market, right? Previously, you would have to go through layers and layers of layers, and then most likely have a committee that would have to give a vote whether this feature goes in or not. Now, what you have is sheer volume. If 10 people are telling me that they need this feature, then heck, we're not having a vote on this anymore, guys. We're doing it. And to me, that's where I think AI steps in. It takes away a lot of the grunt work, a lot of the emotions, but at the same time, it doesn't satisfy that emotional need that a community needs to grow. And I think this is where I think Gamma's done a fantastic job, realizing very early on that community is going to be one of the redeeming features for a product of your product is such that word of mouth matters in that world, right? You need to have people talking about the product on a consistent basis, and I think you guys did a fantastic job on that. But now again, I'm talking too much and I'm not supposed to. I'm going to shift gears, Amanda, and kind of like, hand it back to in terms of talking a bit about Gamma. Now there's a lot of talk, right? Gamma wants to expand into B2B space, and I come from a B2B background, and that is very different from, let's say, consumer who's thinking about what tools to play around with, right? B2B guys are people that need more clarity in why they're taking a business decision. They need to trust your product a bit more, and they need to have more confidence. What I'd like to see is, how do you see your community thought process changing to reflect this shift as Gamma moves into the B2B world? What would change potentially in your strategy? Is there any thought on that you can share?
Yeah, this actually is something that I've been thinking about a lot. As you mentioned, Gamma is more focused on the B2B space. Something that I think that has been really unique about the community today is that it's invitation only. So, we're 1,200 people, which means that the majority of those people have got a personal invitation to join the community because they were power users. Something I've been thinking about a lot is, the community. We also have, it doesn't just live in Slack. We have a companion site so people can actually find it, search for it via, Google, ChatGPT, whatever it is that they're using, and find common questions. Not the entire community isn't surfaced on, the web, but
The web, yeah.
a lot of it is. And so I think of the community as a potential for more enablement and acquisition. And what I'm trying to say is
Enablement and acquisition. Can you define those words for me for 1 second? Because a lot of B2B sellers on this call, they hear enablement and they think about sales training. And I just want to make sure
yeah.
when you talk about enablement and acquisition, is that similar to what you're trying to allude to as well, or different?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So I'm thinking of enablement as customer enablement. So someone who is searching for an answer to Gamma, and they can reach out to our support team, they can search the help center, and then they can also find the community, or they can ask one of the ChatGPT or Claude or whichever AI they're talking to, and hopefully there's a world
Hopefully,
where
yes.
the community is getting surfaced to them
Yep.
in their answers. So all of that is just to say that in terms of thinking about B2B, I ultimately I want the community to reach more people that use Gamma, not just our power users. And so something I've been thinking about and sort of mulling over is opening up the community to not just our power users, but everyone that uses Gamma.
Yeah, that makes
But there's
sense.
a lot of considerations that have to come with that
Yeah.
because I think one of my biggest concerns is, we have this community. You mentioned we have like 200 to 300 people that are really active in the community. And I want to make sure we don't lose that as Gamma continues to grow, as the community continues to grow. So, but at the same time, as Gamma is going B2B, I think giving people the opportunity to be in a community, to have that experience, where they can talk to someone like yourself, or they can ask questions, or they can share what they've built in Gamma. I do see that being something that could be really valuable for people. But that's a little bit of insight into my
It's
2026
actually
community roadmap.
that's a brilliant insight, because I think one of the things I want to just caution people on, as they listen to, is that you're not how do you say this, you're not getting into B2B, you're expanding into B2B. What that means is that you know where you came from, you have a core product that has got what, I think it's 70 million users now, or is it 100 million now? I can't remember. I Every day your numbers change so fast, Amanda, that I get confused. In fact, I don't even know what to trust anymore. There's so much action happening at the Gamma end. So 70 million, 100 million users. You've learned, mastered a specific domain. You're now expanding into B2B. It's like having a second or third child. That doesn't mean you don't love the first child. The first child has taught you how to become a parent, right? And now you're getting into the second. So I just wanted to, just make sure people understand that. As a community manager, you actually made me think of that when you said, I have to think conscientiously. That's one of the words I can't pronounce. Sorry about that. About how do we honor the people that we've had till now, but also bring about this change of traction that we do want to get into the B2B space. And I really like the principle that why not look within the space you are today and see people that have a B2B traction already and see how they can help position that. And I think that's a very smart, judicious way of using your time and effort. Thank you for that. But what I want to do though is I cannot let you leave without giving us some clarity on one final thing that I wanted to discuss with you, which is there are always revenue leaders and sales leaders, right? And they are always talking about the customer. Sales says customer is always right. Customers' pain points are important. Solve customers' problems and you will never go broke, is what my ex-boss used to tell me. But if you're going to go sell to a customer in the expectation that you're going to make a quota, you will go broke, because that is just the wrong way of looking at it. Now, when I heard those things, I was really shocked. But here you are. You've done work in CX. You've done work on the customer side of things, right? You have spent most of your career at what we call customer cold face, right? The customer truth. Now you are seeing this reality about features, bugs, issues. Most likely you're getting the verbal abuse first before the salesperson even hears about it, right? How do you structure your operating principles and the guidance that you would tell salespeople or revenue leaders or leadership to think about when they think about CX? How do we connect the dots? What principles should we be thinking about how to get CX closer to heart? Don't tell me I got you. I couldn't have got you. No way. I think you just you're trying to ruminate on how do we answer this really long-winded question from Deepak. I know. I've got this thing. I like my questions to be layered and layered.
I think, I mean, I think what's hard is that I know my own perspective as a customer experience person, but
Mhm.
I don't really know what the approach to to sales is, and I'm sure everyone has a different approach. So, do you mind repeating your question? Sorry.
Let me flip the question slightly because of something you just said. Amanda, when you are dealing with a customer who is complaining, right? What's the first principle that you keep put into place right there? What happens at that point? Forget the sales angle for 1 second. I'm going to actually help you there a bit in terms of how I want to learn from you what you are experiencing at that moment. A customer has come to you with a crisis or an issue, and he's now literally, let's assume, screaming, shouting, or whatever. What happens at that moment? What do you do? What value system do you kick off that helps calm that person down or helps you to bring structure to the madness that's about to ensue?
Yeah, I mean, it's this is such a big part of customer experience. It's leading with empathy and trying to understand, you know, I fortunately am not in a place where I need to, where I'm getting people that are kicking and screaming, but that's definitely something I did encounter being in customer support. And I think leading with empathy and trying to actually understand what it is that they're experiencing is a really good place to start, because it's really hard to be angry and upset at someone that's responding in a way that's empathetic to your situation.
So, Amanda, let me tell you, that is the book title that you can put there. A CX person's journey to explain to revenue leaders and sales leaders. If you start with empathy and you start with understanding, that's a great place, right? You got to bring something back to level zero. And I think one of the messages that I can share based on what you just said, if I had to go and talk about a principle to every revenue leader on how to handle work with customers, it would be try to put yourself in the shoes of the customer, which is what I heard you say, right? Yeah, and you didn't use the word sympathize, you actually used the word empathy. And to me, empathy means standing in those shoes, walk that walk that the customer is going through, understand from their point of view. To me, that's a very powerful principle. And that principle, I would argue, is also valuable in sales, right? There's a big learning right there. Now, salespeople will tell me there's other principles that matter. Yeah, of course they do. But isn't it awesome that if you can think of a customer's pain from a point of empathy, that makes your conversations much easier and cleaner. And I've also realized one thing: when you use your own vocabulary to analyze a situation, you typically get it wrong. But when you use a customer's vocabulary to analyze a situation, you typically get it right, because you're now forcing your mindset aligned with theirs. And I would say that is the biggest learning I'm going to take away from this call, Amanda, for you. And I will help you build that bridge back. As a CX authority, as someone that's building a community out there, you get people telling you before they even tell a salesperson how bad the product is, you get to hear about all the bugs first, right? And you, yes, you may not do it today, but at some point in your career, you've had those angst moments, right, where someone is screaming, shouting, or upset with you. And to any salesperson listening in, I would simply state that that's the principle that I would say, is that there's this misconception that people have about the work you do. But if you think about it, the work you're doing is actually very similar to what salespeople do, right? empathy with the customer, putting yourself in what is the customer solving for, what was his expectations, and have we delivered against those expectations. And I always say this to any rock star salesperson that I coach, Amanda: work closely with your CX team, because they're the ones that will actually be the canary in the coal mine. They are going to tell you when something is going to go wrong, bad for you. You will get very good feedback from them. In fact, many CX leaders actually put a lot of effort in terms of connecting those dots back to salespeople. And I think that there's a tremendous opportunity. And I think Gamma is now expanding quite aggressively, correct, Amanda, in terms of hiring and beefing up their sales capacity and sales capability as well, because the B2B space demands something very different. I think that the role that that you do, it's going to be have such a massive learning impact on those salespeople, because they're going to see and hear things. In fact, I would tell any rockstar salesperson to actually walk up to Amanda and say, Amanda, anything exciting that happened, anything that I should be aware of, because that gives you tremendous power of seeing where the market is going and actually where customers are complaining about. Selling a product is pretty easy. Living up to the promise that the salesperson made is even more difficult, Amanda. And I think that's where that was the reason for bringing you on this call, because I felt that your story and your journey is a piece of the coin that no one talks about, but it's there, right? It's like, I was speaking to my publisher when I was writing my book, Amanda, and he actually said to me, he spent a lot of time on the dimensions of the book and so on. And I said to him, why are you spending so much time on it? He said, because people don't understand. When your book is lying on a bookshelf, people can't see the words inside. They're going to look at the cover design, they're going to look at the spine, they're going to look at other attributes of the book to make a determination to even pull it off the shelf or not. And that blew my mind. To me, I look at CX as one of those attributes. Your customers buying from you are going to hear negative news if your product doesn't work, and it's not a salesperson that's going to find the product doesn't work. It's most likely going to be you. So any good salesperson listening into this call, let's make sure that we're building bridges with the teams that handle communities, because to me, that is the canary you want sitting on your shoulder, chirping in your ear, far better than a coach or a champion in the customer's environment telling you about how you should be selling to them. Both can be done and both should be done at the same time. But Amanda, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to start wrapping up. If you were to look at community building, and if you were to give some advice as a parting shot, something that you did not necessarily cover in this conversation, for any community manager out there who is, let's say, in the same fast space or any space building a community, what would you say as a parting shot? And I'm repeating myself, as a parting shot, in terms of some principles or some designs that they could think about, and how has Gamma and the fast pace that you have worked through helped you build up that thought process?
Yeah. I think something I found really valuable in my journey of managing a community is the understanding of community-led growth. And, we're talking about sales, and we talk about product-led growth, which obviously is something that Gamma has really experienced. But there's also this element of community-led growth. And by no means am I the expert on this, but the idea is that, just even just taking someone like yourself, you're in the community, and hopefully you feel like your voice is being heard, that you're being valued and recognized in the community. And you are someone who takes the time not only to internally give your feedback and your thoughts to the team, but you also take the time to share that externally with your broader audience. And that's something that can have a huge impact on the company and also within the community. And I think that if you can build this community-led growth engine where you have people like yourself and our other ambassadors actually feeling compelled to share what it is that they like about the product, that's going to touch a lot of different
Yes, I agree
audiences.
with you. Yeah.
And so that's something that, it's not like if you're in community, and you're probably familiar with the concept of community-led growth, but I think getting to see it firsthand, you really understand the value of it. And it's something that, hopefully it feels like a win-win, in that, you feel like you're someone who's valued, and it's really valuable for us when you take the time to share, you
It's,
know,
this is really interesting, because you have a whole segment of people out there who have PLG on their titles and on their resumes, right? Product led growth. Here comes Amanda Rothbard, who says that, hey, there's something called community led growth. And to be honest with you, if you had made that comment maybe 2 3 years ago, I may not have understood it. But after seeing the power of the right communities, the right voice, and the right structure, I do think that this is actually a domain which is really, really powerful. And if I look at, I think Grant has been very generous, the CEO, in his conversations in terms of acknowledging how they have led with people getting that voice out there, getting people to talk about Gamma and how they built up this entire community that actually thrives and actually helps Gamma thrive by getting that message out there as well. And I think there's a tremendous learning in that, Amanda. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to wax on that one a little bit before we go off. So, one last question that I have to ask. Amanda, what is giving you energy at Gamma right now? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
It's funny because, we're heading into the holiday season. Something I have really been feeling excited about is just planning for next year, and something that, I have a lot of big ideas, and I really like getting to get in the weeds and actually brainstorming about, where do we want to see, you
Yeah.
know, Gamma going, but also the community going. And, no spoilers, but we have a lot of big ideas for 2026. So it's been nice. It's things I would say have slowed down, as we're heading into the holidays. I don't know if it maybe is a different experience in sales, but I'm very much in this phase of really just being very thoughtful about,
Yeah.
what 2026 will look like for our customers, for our community. And first week of January, we have a hackathon coming up. So I'm trying to think about what are some ideas that I
What are
want
the
to,
some idea?
yeah, that I want to work on.
But
So
it's really interesting. I think what you just shed light on is actually something that I would say a lot of management textbooks do talk about, right? Sometimes it's not just a purpose that gets us out of bed. It's actually the journey you take to get to a certain purpose, and your purpose may keep changing. And I think this is what I think I'm hearing you say. And I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I'm just thinking about it, Amanda, in this way. Amanda, I was expecting you to give me a simple answer that I wake up in the morning because I'm going to make B2B rock or I'm going to do this. But you gave a very thoughtful answer. As I approach this season of thinking, you already have specific milestones in mind. And that's really important because sometimes we get so caught up with a distant vision of 2 years, 5 years down the road that we sometimes forget that the present matters and what we're going to do tomorrow matters. I like that approach that you mentioned there, that I have some concrete ideas. There's more, but I do know that there's a milestone that I'm really focused on, and I'm going to use the next 2, 3 weeks to get through that. Please do, absolutely, because I know why I need you to do that, ma'am. Because there are 70 million people relying on you to deliver a product that keeps resonating, making a lot of noise, and I'm rooting for it big time, right? Uh, there's a lot of people that get excited when and I'm very sure that when this gets released, people are going to say, "Oh, Gamma, I got to listen to this because Gamma is a unicorn." My message to B2B sellers is Gamma is a unicorn because of what is happening on this podcast. So just make sure that we don't put the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart, but we got to understand greatness comes by doing certain things. And someone once told me it's like Gamma seems to have a strategy for everything. And I said, yes, in hindsight, they had a strategy for everything. But you got to understand one thing, and my understanding of Gamma is that they also course correct very fast, very rapid. And if they find something that works, they double down on it very fast. While the rest of you guys are still deciding whether you want to invest money on this or not, they've already decided where they're not going to invest money and where they are going to invest money, and they already moved on it fast. And I think that's the speed and alacrity that I really enjoyed watching and learning from. And I think anyone, B2B sellers, if you are really interested in understanding how to grow and what founders go through, just go to Grant Lee's LinkedIn feed, feast on the last 20 posts. I cannot tell you how embarrassed I am. I should steal all of his 20 posts and from that, Amanda, create a book and just publish the darn book before he can even sue me. Because he's actually spilled his beans. He just writes and he just gives it out there because he knows one thing, guys. Reading about something doesn't make you a great orchestrator. It's the type of work that Amanda and the communities do. When you take that plus all the other bits and bits and pieces, of course, it's a puzzle or a pie. But then you focus on making sure that each person gets the ability to do their work and deliver. I think that's what makes Gamma very unique and very different. Now, ma'am, I'm going to stop at this point. Amanda, thank you very much for helping us figure out the other side of the coin that a lot of people don't see. Like it's the other side of the moon, right? We see it and we say, wow, that's beautiful as well. Why don't we see this often? And that's one of the reasons why I kicked off Sales Uncharted in the way I designed this, is to come in and bring in obtuse observations and people. And Amanda, you've been very clear. I'm really not sure about how I can help salespeople, Deepak, but let me tell you what I am seeing. Yes, that helps. That allows salespeople to see a lot. And I've tried my best to also be a bit of a bridge between my community and the thought process you brought, Amanda. But Amanda, extremely grateful for you coming on board. Thank you very much for your time. Take care. Bye,
thank
Amanda.
you.
My pleasure.